L'kutei Sichos Chelek Yud Zayin Emor Gimel, a fascinating classic Rashi Sicha, where we're going to analyze, dissect the Rashi word for word, and introduce a whole new understanding with a powerful lesson. As a matter of fact, one of the unique things here is that it is something that Rashi does not say, that actually leads to the beautiful explanation that this Sikha has to offer. So, the discussion of today is about the mitzvahs of Leket and Peah and other such mitzvahs that are mentioned in Parshas Emor, actually in the middle, right in the middle of the Parshas HaMoyados. Parshas Emor has a section that speaks about the Yom Tov, Pesach, the Karban Omer, Shavuos, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, and right in the middle, it talks about the mitzvah of Leket and Peah. And the question becomes that we already just last week in Parshas Kedoshim, we already spoke about the mitzvah. Over there it's Leket and Peah and Peret Karmecha and Oilelos, which are grape-related mitzvahs to leave in the field. So the Mefarshim discuss, and Rashi discusses, why is this mitzvah or these mitzvahs mentioned twice. In der Parshas HaMoyados, bei Parshas Seinu nach dem, was die Teire sagt an wegen Karbonis und Yom Tov und Shavuos, after the Torah tells us about the Karbonis and the Yom Tov of Shavuos, steht in Pasuk, the Pasuk says, Uvekutzrechem es kitzir artzechem, loi sechale pa'as soda bekutzrecha, v'leket kitzircha loi selakit. When you harvest the field, you shall not finish the corner when harvesting, and you should not collect the individual stalks that fall. Stellen sich Mefarshi HaTorah und seine Masber dem Tam, was die Torah sagt an, wegen die Mitzvah von Peah und Mitzvahs von Peah v'leket bei dem Tzivui of Meyados. So the Mefarshim address this question: why does the Torah command about the mitzvahs of Leket and Peah, specifically while discussing the Moyados, the Yomim Tovim? The Rebbe Aleph, the Rebbe Ezra sagt, v'tam lahaskir v'kutzrechem es k'tzir artzechem pam shenis. The reason that it mentions this mitzvah a second time, ba'avur ki chag Shavuos b'kurei k'tzir chitim, because Yom Tov Shavuos is the Yom Tov of the harvest. It's known as Chag HaKatzir. Hizir shalei tishkach ma shetzivisicha lasses b'yamim. So the Torah is just reminding you, it's cautioning you not to forget that which has been commanded with regards to that time period. Since during the time of Katzir, the time of harvest, you have to do these mitzvahs. And we were just talking about Shavuos, which is the time of Katzir, the time of harvest. So the Torah is reminding you to take care of these mitzvahs. Based the Ramban is masber, the Ramban has a different explanation. Ki bekutzrechem es k'tzir artzechem remez lekatzir haniskir b'reisha parsha. Yoymar in the beginning of this parsha, it speaks about the here it says of v'kutzrechem. It's referring back to the beginning of this parsha, where it was talking about the Karban ha'omer, where you have to cut down the field to bring the omer. So therefore he says, you should not finish cutting the corner which is of the field which is being harvested for the omer, and nor should you collect the fallen stalks. The mitzvah of omer should not overpower the mitzvahs of Leket and Peah. In other words, I might think that because I'm cutting down the Omer for Hashem, so I should take all of it for Hashem. I shouldn't leave even the Leket or the Peah. So therefore he tells me, no, yeah, even if the field is being used for Hashem, you still have to leave the Leket and the Peah. Gimel Kein Zazagan under the Mefarshim. There are other Mefarshim that say something similar to the Ramban. As the Torah could bavaren as ich die Sade was mahat von ihrer gebrachtem Omer is mechuyev in Peah v'leket. That the Torah is telling us that even the field from which you took the Omer is also, you're also obligated to give Leket and Peah from it. Warum es wollt given as Svara zu sagen, as Jesus mahat die bereishis kitzichem von der Sade gebrachter Karban la Hashem, that I might think that because I already brought from this field, a carbon to Hashem. I already fulfilled the mitzvah with the harvest of this field. The mitzvah of the Omer. I would think that I don't have to do other mitzvahs because I already did my mitzvah. It's almost to say I already elevated the field. I already used this field for Hashem. So I don't have to do more mitzvahs with this field. So therefore, the pasuk tells me, no, you have to bring leket and payah also. So it's very similar to the Ramban. The Ramban is saying that I would think that I should use the whole field for Hashem, and therefore I don't have to leave a payah and leket. The other Mefarshim say I would think that I already paid my dues from this field, and therefore I don't need to bring payah and leket. Either way, the Torah is reminding us that I'm obligated to bring payah and leket. The Fiza, based on this, that we have other Mefarshim that give these explanations to this question of why is why are these mitzvahs mentioned here in Parshas Hamayadis? We have to understand why Rashi does not use any of these explanations and brings in a drasha from Teras Kehanim. Emor Rabbi Avardimas. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Avardimas, son of Rabbi Yossi, says, why does the pasuk place these mitzvahs in the middle of the discussion of the festivals? Pesach v'atzeres mikan. Beforehand, we just discussed Pesach and Shavuos. Rosh Hashanah v'Yom Kippurim v'Chag mikan, and right afterwards we're going to discuss Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot. So why is it right here, smack in the middle? L'lamdecha. So and he answers, it's to teach you. That anyone who gives leket, shikha, and payah properly to the poor, ma'ilin love, we consider it ki'ilu bona beis hamikdash, as if he's built the beis hamikdash, v'hikriv alav karbanos of beseichai, and he brought the karbanos. Since this parashas Hamayadis is talking about karbanos, the Torah is telling us, I want to remind you I want to talk about leket, shikha, and payah, so that way you should know that giving leket and payah, leket, shikha, and payah is just like bringing karbanos. Is nicht move was Rashi bringt als Tiritz auf der Shaila Adrashe in Agada von Teras Kehanim, but was ist nicht mefarish gibt Pshutei, aderech mit Yerusha now. Rashi is Pshutei Shel Mikra. He could have brought a simpler explanation like the ones brought earlier instead of bringing a drasha. It's a very beautiful drasha, saying that a person could give leket and payah, and it's as if he brought karbanos in the Beis Hamikdash, but it's a drasha. Why does Rashi go for the drasha and not for the more simple explanation? Das, was Rashi will nicht annehmen, dem Teres von Ramban und von Atel von den anderen Mefarshim. The fact that Rashi does not want to use the explanation of the Ramban or the other Mefarshim, that could be explained. Weil if Teres hat der Pasuk bekutzrechem gedarstehen bereisha parsha gleich nach dem Ziel von Ksiris Eimer. If the reason why he's bringing the Pasuk of bekutzrechem is as a continuation to the carbon ha'omer, to tell me that even though I'm using the field for the omer, I still have to bring leket and payah, then I should have put this pasuk earlier in this parsha by the discussion of the omer. So therefore I understand why the distance between carbon ha'omer and the pasuk of v'kutzrechem is too great to bring them together. But the beer from Even Ezra is l'cheira a beer pashut umaspik m'shudas mikra. But the explanation of the Even Ezra that he wants to just remind you in the time of Katzir to take care of these mitzvahs seems to be a simple explanation. It seems to be a sufficient explanation in Shudas mikra. And the question therefore is, why does Rashi not answer like the Even Ezra and instead choose a drasha? If Rashi had a different Pshuta Shel Mikra, different Pashat Pshat, then fine, Rashi could go different. But if Rashi has to resort to a drasha, why is that better than the drasha, than the Pirush of the Even Ezra? That made us verstehen, and see if Beis we're going to ask another question on Rashi that is going to begin the journey towards the answer, but first we have to go through a series of questions. We have to begin by prefacing a number of nuances in Rashi. Rashi stellt sich auf dem Wort uvekutzrechem und is mefarish chazar v'shana la'aver aleim b'shnei lavim. Before this drasha of Rabbi Avardimas, which Rashi brings, right before that, Rashi says something else. He says, why is it in Torah twice? In other words, not why is it in Parshas Hamayadis. Why b'chalal do we have it twice? If we have it once in Kedoshim and again in Emor, la'aver aleim b'shnei lavim, to teach you that if a person transgresses this prohibition and cuts down the payah and does not leave the leket, he is over on two lavin. Two transgressions. And then Rashi continues with the drasha of Rabbi Avardimas. Ist nicht verstandig. Says Yadua, as B'shas Rashi sagt, that zweiten, das unter dem Pirish auf demselben Inyan, oder Wort, it's known that when Rashi brings a different concept, a different idea, even though it's on the same words or on the same words of the pasuk, Rashi would put it under a separate heading. It's two separate Rashis. If Rashi wants to teach two things on the same word, Rashi will put them in two separate Rashis. From the fact that Rashi takes both ideas, the idea that you're over on two lavin, and the idea of Rabbi Avardimas to compare leket and peah to karbonos, since Rashi puts them both in the same Rashi under the same heading, is moved on as the Abana Shayches zwischen sich. So it's understood that there's some connection between them. There seemingly to be two totally different ideas. The fact that you're over on two lavin, seemingly is not connected to the teaching of Rabbi Avardimas, which is addressing only the fact that it's here in the middle of Parshas Haragolim and not why you need to have it twice. In addition, we have three more questions in this seif, and there'll be more in the next one. Aleph the diuk hayadua as Rashi bringt the Maimer b'shem Emre nor dan when der mit kumtzu ahesafas biur in the teichen Maimer. Rashi only brings the name of the one who said the teaching only when it adds or enhances the understanding of this teaching. Neitik faran Talmud Muluch, it is necessary for the seasoned student. Why? What? How is this explanation enhanced by knowing that it was said by Rabbi Avardimas? Beis, it is mefaret umayrich ba'akusha. Rashi elaborates in the question. Pesach vatzeres mikan, v'rashon v'yimpurim v'chag mikan. That and before it is we talk about Pesach and Atzeres. After we talk about Rosh Kippur and Sukkot. Banugim sich nit miten sagen ma ra kosov litnem b'emtza regol. It does not suffice by just asking the general question: why are these mitzvahs placed in the middle of the parsha of Yom Tovim? So the question is, why does Rashi have to add on that a whole extra bit of the question? It seems to be extra. Gimel, third point. In pasuk werden der mont nor peya unleket. The pasuk here mentions the lav of not cutting down the peah, and the mitzvah and the lav of leket of not picking up the fallen stalks. Rashi is meisiv eich shikha. Rashi adds the word shikha, and the question is going to be why? Why does Rashi add a word that's not a mitzvah that's not brought in the pasuk? Now in the brackets he has a suggested response that responds both to Beis and to Gimel. Beis, the fact that there's a long-winded question. Gimel, the fact that Rashi adds shikha. You could say that possibly Rashi is just quoting Rabbi Avardimas. Rabbi Avardimas asked the question like that, so therefore Rashi asks it, and Rabbi Avardimas says shikha. So maybe that's it Rashi saying it. Even though Rashi is quoting Rabbi Avardimas. So maybe that's why he has a long-winded question and why he adds shikha. But that can't be the explanation. Why? It's been discussed numerous times that Rashi's approach is not to quote verbatim the entire wording of the one who said it. He only brings the part that is relevant to Pshuto Mikra. Especially since Rashi here does not say it is quoted, it is stated in Teras Kehanim, which might give him a reason to quote the Teras Kehanim verbatim. We know that, especially if it doesn't say Issa Teras Kehanim, Rashi is going to pull out the quotes, the parts that are relevant to Pshuto Mikra. So therefore, the fact that Rashi says shikha, although the pasuk doesn't say it, and the fact that Rashi elaborates on the question the way the Teras Kehanim does is obviously, according to Rashi, relevant to understanding the pasuk. And how? That's our question. How does the long question help us understand this this inyan? Gimel. In Seif Gimel, he's going to show us that although we just showed how with regards to the long question and with regards to Shikha, Rashi does quote the Teras Kayanim in those things. Nevertheless, there are other parts where Rashi is different, changes from the Teras Kayanim. And each one calls for an explanation. Why did Rashi change from the Teras Kayanim? The Kasher wird noch starker. Rashi is belavach im Mishana. Rashi does change from the Teras Kayanim. So this makes our question greater. Here we're trying to say that maybe Rashi's copying the Teras Kayanim, but he doesn't copy. He does change. And in various different details. From the Lashon v'yishtet in Teras Kayanim, from the wording of the Teras Kayanim. Number one, in Teras Kayanim is the Lashon of Rosh Hashanah v'yikvonim mikan, where Rashi is Meiseh v'chag. The Teras Kayanim doesn't mention Sukkos. It says Pesach Atzeres mikan, Rosh Hashanah v'yikvonim mikan, and Rashi adds the word v'chag and Sukkos. Rashi highlights Sukkos. Two, in Teras Kayanim steht leket shikcho peya u'maiser ani. When Rashi is mashmit maiser ani, although we said before that Rashi includes shikha, even though it's not in the pasuk, but when it comes to maiser ani, which is mentioned in Teras Kayanim, Rashi omits it. Rashi does not say the words u'maiser ani. Three, in Teras Kayanim is the lashon shekol misha u'maitzi v'chulu. The Teras Kayanim says whoever expends from leket shikha and peya, whoever spends it, whoever brings it, takes it out of his account. When Rashi says whoever gives it. So the Teras Kayanim says anybody who takes it from his own. Rashi says whoever gives it to the ani. Number four, in Teras Kayanim it says Mailin olav kilo beis mikdash kayam v'makir karbonis l'seichi is a fascinating differentiation. The Teras Kayanim says it's as if the beis mikdash is standing and you are bringing karbonis within it. Rashi, Mailin olav akilu bona beis hamikdash. Rashi says it's as if he built the beis hamikdash. V'hikre olav karbonis l'seichi, and it says and he brought the karbonis in it, which is a much greater thing. It's not only is the person bringing karbanis in an already built Beis Hamikdash, he's as if he's building the Beis Hamikdash. Since the way Rashi quotes was saying in the name of Rabbi Everdimos, it seems that Rashi is quoting something verbatim, and therefore it seems to imply that Rashi had a girsa that read the way Rashi says it and not the way we have it in our regular Teras Kayanim. That itself demands an explanation. Why does Rashi choose an obscure girsa of Rabbi Everdimos of the Teras Kayanim instead of using the accepted one that we have in our Svarim? From them was an empton davka di girsa, and from the fact that Rashi does take this lesser known girsa, is muchach aziz mer masim mustav b'shul mikra. It's evident that girsa, according to Rashi, is more consistent with shul mikra. And the question is why and how. Siftal, we have one last short question before we start the beer. Vaitir is Rashi maitik nemvar taziv. After this Rashi Rabbi Everdimos, it says the pasuk says la'ani v'lager taziv oisam should leave the lepeya and the leket for the ani and for the ger. So Rashi quotes the word taziv and the Mefarshim explains hanach lifneim, leave it for them. V'heim yilkutu, they, the ani and the ger, will collect it. V'ein l'chalasayeh le'achad mehem, you shouldn't help them. You shouldn't help them collect. For Ekman of them, so the Mefarshim asked the question: Varvos is Rashi Mefaresh and Var Taziv erst in their parsha. If this is what Taziv means, that you're not allowed to help the ani and the ger, why does Rashi wait for this parsha to explain it nit frier in Parshas Kedoshim? Where steht zum ersten Mal im selben Lashon? Why not earlier in Parshas Kedoshim, where this same word la'ani v'lager Taziv is already said, and there it's the first time? So right away over there, Rashi should have explained it. Why does Rashi wait until this Taziv? So this is our questions. Number one, in general, why does Rashi take the drasha of Rabbi Everdimos, not the drasha not the pirush of the Ibn Ezra, or a simpler pirush? Number two, what's the connection in the same Rashi between Lavar Olav Vishnei Lavin and the drasha of Rabbi Everdimos? Why does Rashi mention the name Rabbi Everdimos? Why is there a long question? Why does Rashi mention Shikha? Why does Rashi add V'chag? Why does Rashi not include Meiser Oni? Why does Rashi say the word Noisein Leket Gourarie instead of Moitzi? And why did Rashi say Bona Beis Hamikdash instead of Beis Hamikdash Kayam? And the last question, why does Rashi explain Taziv here and not in the earlier in the Ketoshin where it mentions Leket and Peah for the first time. And here we go for the explanation. Was der Pasuk über kurz nachher Gamer steht da in Parshas Medes beklalo nit na makom am yuchat far di mitzvahs is the fipsude shomikra durch derech Rashi bebrusik in kashenet. The fact that Rashi that the pasuk mentions these mitzvahs in Parshas Medes does not bother Rashi psude shomikra. In other words, Rabbi Avardimus is explaining, and we'll get to that in a moment, and as is the Ramban and the other Mefarshim, is explaining the connection between the mitzvahs Leket and Peah and Parshas Hamayadis. This does not bother Rashi, according to Pshuto Shomikra. Because according to Rashi, it's understood why. Al derech hapshat, kum das behemshach zu die früher gesagte beparsha zu mitzvahs. Was the pasuk sagt dann, bekeshet succeeded tzavua. These mitzvahs are coming as a continuation to the other mitzvahs that are in this parsha that are related to the harvest. He starts earlier that you should, when you harvest the field, you should bring the carbon ha'omer. Then it tells you that on Shavuos you would bring a mincha from the new wheat that was grown in the new season. And as a continuation to that, the Torah gives us additional mitzvahs that are connected with harvest. So therefore Rashi is not bothered at all by the fact that these mitzvahs are positioned here, are placed here. That doesn't bother Rashi. What's bothering Rashi is why twice? Why are these mitzvahs necessary twice? After already learning in the Parshas Kedoshim, Ebenezer is madgish v'tam lahaskir v'chulu pam shenis. Like the Ebenezer says the words, why is it mentioned twice? And Rashi explains that the reason that it says it twice, we're not discussing where the second time is. But the fact that it says it twice is to tell you that there's two lavin. The person is Eiver on Peah or Leket, he's Eiver on two lavin. High time is Gufa. He's moving us as Rashi let need for the Ebenezer. Now that I know that Rashi is not bothered by the positioning of it, but the placing of it, he's only bothered by the duplicity of it. I don't know duplicity, by the repetition of it. So I understand now why Rashi doesn't say like Ebenezer. He's here that he was cautioning us not to forget what we've already been commanded. This doesn't work. This shot of the Ebenezer does not work according to Pshuto Shemikra. Why? In Parshas Kedoshim says, mit Nsibi of Peah and Leket, steht in Pasuk, the Karmecha leis Eile loperet Karmecha leis Lakit. In Parshas Kedoshim, in addition to Peah and Leket, it also talks about Eile lois and Peret Karmecha. Eile lois are young, unripe grapes, and Peret Karmecha are grapes that are not part of a cluster, not part of a bunch. And the Torah tells us that those two either you can't collect, you have to leave it for the ani in the year. If the Torah has to remind us not to forget the mitzvahs, then the Torah should have also reminded us about Peret and Eilelis. Peret, Karmecha, and Eilelis. The fact that the Torah does not mention those is from them muchach. This makes it clear. The Torah is not afraid that I'm going to forget these mitzvahs. But the mitzvahs. As we see by most mitzvahs, the Torah doesn't remind us a second time, oh, don't forget these mitzvahs. Even not when the time is being discussed in the Torah. And we shouldn't forget to fulfill them. The Torah gives us a mitzvah in most cases and trusts us that we're going to remember that when the time comes to fulfill it. So from the fact that the Torah doesn't say Peret and Eilelis means that the Torah is not afraid that we're going to forget the mitzvahs. So in that case, why does it say it twice? The fact that it said twice is laver alei and b'shnei lavin is in order to teach us that a person is over twice. When it's kinkashen nit farvos the Torah bestimmt as wenn es over b'shnei lavin dafke bei di mitzvahs und nit bei andere. And it's not a question why these two mitzvahs Peret, Leket and Peah are you over in two lavin and not by any others? Rashi is mefarish arbe mitzvahs patera nemru v'nichpulu v'chulu l'chayi v'lanu shalmin lavin shpem. Like Rashi already said in Parshas Kisisa that there are many mitzvahs in the Torah that are said once or twice or more than that in order to obligate the person to be punished according to the number of times that it's mentioned in the Torah. It's not a question. There are many mitzvahs that it's done, by which it's done, and when the Eibusher chooses to do so, he chooses to do so. When im Pshuti Shal Mikra hat kein Ordnung zu fragen, was sind die Mitzvahs ausgeteilt in dem von der anderen. And im Pshuti Shal Mikra, in Halacha, you could learn deeper. What's this mitzvah versus that mitzvah? But when it comes to Pshuti Shal Mikra, the Torah chooses certain mitzvahs for which the Torah says it's asr. There's certain mitzvahs the Torah says it's asr a few times, so that there should be more lavin involved. But why this one over that one is not a Pshuti Shal Mikra question. So we already understand why Rashi does not follow. He asked the question with regards to why did Rashi go for a drasha, and why does Rashi not take Even Ezra? So first of all, we clarified that Rashi at the outset is not bothered by the connection of the karbonis of the leket and peah and mayadis. That doesn't bother Rashi. That makes perfect sense. You're talking about kotzer, you're talking about harvest. So he gives you a few more harvest-related mitzvahs. The question becomes, why is it twice? And Rashi doesn't like the pirush of the Even Ezra, because if the reason why it writes twice is just as a reminder, then why are the other two, Peret and Eilos, not mentioned twice? Therefore, Rashi says, L'chayiv aleim b'shnei lavin. Now in Sivav, he's going to say that now that we understand the situation, that the mitzvahs of leket and peah are not being introduced here for the first time. They're only being brought here for a second time in order to tell me that there's two lavin. Now the question is asked, if that case, why by Parshas HaMayados? And as he's going to say in Sivav, it seems that Parshas HaMayados is more about Mayados than about Kotzir, than about harvest. And therefore, why does the Torah choose to tell me this detail that you're over on two lavin, specifically smack in the middle of Parshas HaMayados, implying that there's some connection between the two? And that's why we need the drasha of Rabbi Avardimas. Let's see it inside. After Rashi tells us that there's that the reason why Torah tells us these mitzvahs twice is to tell me that you're over on two lavin. Now comes a question: why in the middle of the regalim? When the kasha hat an or dafke and the emtza regalim is beofen from Pesach vatzeres mikan v'Rosh Hashanah v'Yom Kippurim v'Chag mikan, and the question it fits only because it's the emtza regalim, and not only that, but as Rashi, as we asked earlier about the long-winded question, dafke because Pesach vatzeres on this side, Rosh Hashanah v'Yom Kippurim v'Chag on that side, is why this question is so strong. Why here specifically do you mention the second lav of Peah and Leket? If it was a brand new tzivah, we didn't know about it earlier, and it was being introduced here, as the posik stellt, then we could have explained, as the posik stellt dort die mitzvahs von Peah and Leket, kishem uvehemshich, was sagt die andere tzivuyim b'shayches atzvua. Then we would just say the reason it's here is because we're discussing harvest things, so we throw in a few more mitzvahs that are harvest related. It wouldn't be a question. The Baldas is atzivi v'lav chadash. Stelt us the pasuk, since it's a new commandment, so the pasuk puts it here. You shouldn't think that with these above mentioned harvest related mitzvahs, that is the sum total of all of the harvest related mitzvahs. And now he could finish the harvest and take whatever's left for himself. Seif Aleph, similar to the other mefarshim that we mentioned in Seif Aleph, that you would think that once I did Omer or once I did Mincha Chadasha, I could take the rest for myself. Nor uvekutschlechem es kitzir artzechem seine dann noch mitzvahs darfton edem ikenemen und davon. So the pasuk tells me, again, if this was the first time it was being mentioned in the Torah, then it would make sense. The Torah is telling me, 1 second, you're not done with harvest-related mitzvahs. You can't yet take the tvua home. You have to have other mitzvahs that have to be done before you could benefit from the field. Don't cut down the peah, don't collect the leket. So if it was the first time that it was being said, then it would make sense that Torah tells me, 1 second, there's more to be done. But since Rashi just explained to us that this is here only to tell me that there's 2 lavin, but I already know this mitzvah from before, from Parshas Kedoshim, is es normasim zu stehen da und nicht be Parsha ademe betichana la Parsha shenemar ba b'pama aleph, then it would only be fitting to place it here and not in a discussion that is more consistent with what it's about, like in the first time around where it's discussing other agricultural things. It only makes sense to put it here if it's connected to the theme of the Parsha. Because it's not necessary to be told here, hey, we don't need to know it here, I already know it. The only reason it would be here is to tell me, is because it's connected to this discussion. Aber benitten die dann steht der Pasuk zwischen den Jonim, was ich getechanam is nicht that they feel the mitzvah shebektsira, no mitzvah karbonis from the Regalim. But over here, seemingly, the Pasuk is being placed among a discussion that is primarily about the karbonis of Yom Tiv and not so much about harvest. V'horaya, Pesach vatzeres mikan, v'Rosh Hashanah v'Yipurim v'Chag mikan. It's not just next to the Omer or next to Shavuos. There's Pesach and Shavuos on one side, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot on the other side. But Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippurim are not connected to the harvest. Umizeh mashma, as the ganze parsha zikari karbanos amayodos. The fact that it also discusses the Shana Yom Kippurim and is obviously, because the theme of this parsha is not so much about harvest, it's more about the Yom Tovim. To vi pas da arain di azhora laver b'shnei lavin when it gets to pay leket. So why is this detail that a person is over and pay leket is 2 lavin? Why is it placed here in the middle of parsha mayodis? So we've answered some of our questions already. We've answered why these 2 parts of Rashi are in the same Dibur HaMaschil, because the question that we're asking that brings in Rabbi Avardimos is only after I know Laver Lebishne Lavin. Once I said that I already know the mitzvahs of Pei and Leket from before, and the only reason that it's here is because to tell me Laver Lebishne Lavin, then the question becomes, why is this mitzvah placed in the middle of Parshas HaMayados? And it also explains why there is a long-winded question, because the fact that Pesach Vatzeres Mikan, Rosh Hashanah Mikan, highlights the fact that this parsha is more about Yom Tov than it is about Kotzir, about harvest, and therefore the question is, why take a harvest-related mitzvah and drop it in a second time in the middle of Parshas HaMayados? Of them kum da teretz, and Sif Zayin, we're going to go to the reason, and we're going to explain what is taka the connection between leket and peah and karbonis. Lelamdecha, to teach you, shakol lanesin leket shikho peah lani karai, that whoever gives leket shikha and peah to the ani properly, in a proper way, ma'ilin alav, we consider it ki'ilu bana beis hamikdash. V'hikriv kalav karbonis v'seiche, as if he built the beis hamikdash and he brought karbonis within it. The Asbar in them, from them. The Shaykhus und Vergleich von Matnes Aniyim zu Akravas Karbonis is moving. The connection between, the comparison between giving gifts to the poor and bringing Karbonis is understood. Kashem fi Karbonis heben zechan from the Adam ki yakriv mikem v'lim min hagezel. Just like Karbonis begin from the fact that a person has to bring something mikem from his own possessions and not from something that was stolen. It is makriv and gita weg von seine. He offers and gives away from his own to Mizbeach v'Koyen, leitem tzivu from the Eibishtin, either to the Mizbeach or to the Koyen, according to the directive of Hashem. Similarly, by the gifts to the poor. He fulfills the commandment of Hashem to geben von sein Tvua zu die Aniyim, to give of his Tvua to the poor. Git up von seinen Nechasim, he's giving away from his own possessions zu die Aniyim, to the poor, leitem tzivu from the Eibishtin, according to the command of Hashem. Now, why is Leket and Peah more unique than other tzedakah? Even though every time you give charity to the poor, you're giving something that belongs to you away to someone else. He says, when you talk about leket, shikha, and peah, these gifts highlight this fact in a stronger and more unique manner. Bastam tzedakah, My regular tzedakah money can gimold zayin. There could be a scenario, does geld was git, hoter fardin b'li that the money that he's giving to tzedakah came to him, he profited, he made the money without too much hard work. It was an easy business deal, or he inherited the money, or he found the money, and so on and so forth. So he's nevertheless, even though the money came to him easily, it's still a big mitzvah. The Alter Rebbe says that he's giving away chaye nafsho, he's giving away his life sustenance. He says, nervous, it's because he could have used that money to buy food for himself. So this, consequently, it means when he gives tzedakah, he's giving away his life source, his life sustenance. Not because of the effort invested, but because of what he could have done with the money. He does he but the produce of the field that he's giving away, that came through actual effort and toil. He had to plow, he had to plant, then he has to harvest. Like the pasuk says, that you eat bread through the sweat of your brow. You have to work really hard to get to the point of leket shikha and peah. So when a person, therefore we compare it to karbanis, and we say that just like was the faris the drash of Rabbi Averdimus b'teras kayanim, therefore Rabbi Averdimus teaches, ma'ilin lav kilu beis hamikdash kayam v'umakrim komenes l'teichei shayich beikir b'leket shikha peah ma'israni unibatztaka stam, and therefore Rabbi Averdimus teaches that a person gives matnas aniyim leket shikha and peah ma'israni. It's as if he brought karbanis in the Beis Hamikdash, specifically those things, because there was such a yegiyah involved, because there was such a toil and effort involved. Therefore, it's considered as if he took his hard-earned efforts and he brought karbanis with it as well. That's the pshat in Rabbi Averdimus. That's the comparison between matnas aniyim and karbanis, leket shikha and peah and karbanis. Rashi takes this up bad goshen esefes. However, Rashi adds an extra emphasis. Rashi doesn't suffice with what Rabbi Averdimus taught. Rashi says there's more to it. As the yigiyah in the tvua sa'aretz was akita some money, the yigiyah, the toil that he invests in the produce, which he's later giving away to the ani, und das nach eder nimmt die tvua zu sich und dann gitter von ihr trume und meiser v'chulu. Which this is something that he's doing before he can even bring it home. And when he brings it home, he has to still give Truma and Meiseres. Und nachdem is nenne von dem Lechem, was kriegt von seinen Tfuim. Only later could he enjoy the act, have the benefit from his Tvua. He does need nor be able to makir again karbonis. It's not just like Rabbi Averdimus said that it's as if he brought karbonis. Nor echilu bana Beis Hamikdash. It's as if he built the Beis Hamikdash. B'dugma so avede v'ayagiyah in binyan Beis Hamikdash. Was kumt eder is not karbonis dort. Karbonis of dort. It's similar to the building of the Beis Hamikdash. So there's 2 points I want to mention here. Number one, Pashat Rashi is saying that because the tvua, the leket, the shikha and peah come through so much yegiyah, it's as if he worked hard not just to bring karbanos but to build the Beis Hamikdash, but also there's an order here in this seif. When it comes to the binyan Beis Hamikdash, first there's binyan Beis Hamikdash, which is one level of yegiyah, and then there's karbanos afterwards. It could be that in the seder ha'avodah of the field, you have a similar thing. That you have the yegiyah of the leket shikha and peah, then you bring it home, and then you do trumas and meiseres. So the trumas and meiseres might be compared to the karbonis, and the leket shikha and peah is like the binyan Beis Hamikdash that makes it possible to bring the karbonis later. Now, of course, in Rashi says that the leket shikha and peah is also karbonis. I'm just pointing out that he makes, in this last paragraph, he points out a seder, that there's binyan Beis Hamikdash, only then could there be karbanis. Also over here, there's leket shikha and peah, and only then could he bring the tvua home, and then bring trumas and meiseres. Okay. So this is the answer to the question, why the Torah puts the mitzvah of leket shikha, mitzvahs of leket and peah, in the middle of parshas HaKarbanis. And to use Rashi's emphasis to teach you that the effort that's invested in planting the fields and ultimately bringing leket and peah is as if the person built a Beis Hamikdash and brought karbanis in it. Now we're going to continue in Sivchas. We're going to continue to address, number one, why Rashi uses the words noisein, when the Teras Kenim uses the word moitzi, and that's going to lead us to the discussion about Meiser Sheni. In this comparison of in the fact that it's as if either the Beis Hamikdash was standing already, or he built the Beis Hamikdash and he brought karbanes, then a Dutch When you talk about the fact that a person is giving leket and peya, and this is compared to the karbanes, there's two ways of looking at it. There's two elements, there's two components that are happening here that we could look at each one individually. One is the fact that I'm giving up something of my own. Because the Eibishter commanded me to do so, I give up something that I could have used to sustain my life. And additionally, something that he worked very hard to accomplish. So the first focus, the first component is the fact that it's coming out of my bank account. Base, the giving. The fact that the Eibishter commanded and is being given to the ani. Two things are happening. Number one, it goes out of my account, or out of my field. And number two, it goes into the possession of the ani. These are two separate things. Number one, the fact that it's leaving my possession. Number two, that it's going into the possession of the ani. What's the difference? If the emphasis is that I'm giving up something that was connected to my life, then it's not so relevant how the ani gets it. It's more important that I give it away than how the ani gets it. But if the emphasis is on the giving, then how I give it, the fact that it should be done in a complete way is important. If you're comparing the mitzvah of leket and peya to karbonis, because of the fact that it's being given to the ani, then only if it's given to the ani properly can you compare it to karbanos. So it depends how you look at it. But if you look at it that the ikir is that the main emphasis is that I'm giving something away, then how it gets to the ani doesn't matter. But if you're saying the emphasis is that I'm giving something to an ani, then I have to give it to the ani in the perfect, most beautiful way in order to have this comparison to the karbanos. Und das ist der Chelek zwischen dem Tloschen von Rabbi Everdimos, wie steht in Teras Kenim, und wie gebracht in Pirush Rashi. And this is the difference between Rabbi Everdimos, the way he's brought in Teras Kenim, and the way he's brought in Rashi. In Teras Kenim is the Chilish Vashva, now from leket chulu zu karbanos, in dem was is moitzi die Tue von sein Sada. Point number one, Rabbi Everdimos Teras Kenim says the word moitzi. The most important emphasis here is that he's giving away something of his own. And therefore, is there moisif shikho meiser ani? And therefore, even though the pasuk doesn't say shikho or meiser ani, Rabbi Avardimos includes it in this comparison. Was ein legamre gleich to leket and pay in them. Was there is moisif von sein rishus die tvu was kommt durch gies kapov. They're exactly the same thing. They're identical to leket and pay in the element, in the fact that he's giving away something that he acquired through the work and effort of his hands. So Rabbi Abardimus is saying that whether it's meiser, whether it's leket or peya or shikha or meiser ani, because he worked hard for it and he's giving it away, therefore it's considered as if he brought karbanos to the Beis Hamikdash. Mashenkin Rashi was his madgish das was neisen loni karoi, but Rashi has a different emphasis. Rashi emphasizes the fact that he's giving it to the ani, and so now we're going to have to say that how it gets given to the ani is also important. Is there moisef nor shikha? Rashi adds shikha and not meiser ani. Heyos as nor shikha is bedema to leket to pay. In them was in the sinners because only shikha and not meiser ani is similar to leket and peya in the fact that it's being given to the ani properly. Leket and peya, he's not only he's taking it from his own possession, but he's leaving it for the ani, he's giving it to the ani. And the ani can take it. Shikha is the same thing, there's no difference. Shikha is a bundle that got left in the field, which he leaves for the ani. So in these three aspects, leket, shikha, and peya, there is, it also includes the nesina karoi. But as we're going to say in a moment, Meiser Ani, there's a detail that changes, and the sin is not karoi. Daheinu, die alle drei mitzvahs like Shichon Peah seinen gleichen, dem was nicht nur Gita weg Sachen was seinen verbunden mit der Chayis Nafshei, like Shichon Peah are all identical in the fact that not only is he giving away something that's connected to his life sustenance. No, the Nisina is in Ashlemus Dikkanefim, but the Nisina, the giving is in a perfect way. Why? Because their Nisan need thereby Afilu Kin Tevas Anah, because the Nisan has no private, no ulterior motive, no personal benefit from the gift. Which he by giving it to his servant or maid, or the Tzaniyim, as I didn't even know the gates of were giving to poor people who are closer to him. That doesn't happen. In other words, he's going to say in a moment, "The Meiser Ani, this Tevas Anah." The Meiser Ani, which is 10% of the produce, which gets given to an Ani, the owner of the field could choose which Ani it goes to. If he has a neighbor who's Ani, if he has a relative who's an Ani, if he has a friend who's an Ani, you can give it to them. You can give it to whoever he wants. And that is a certain benefit that he gets, that he's able to give his Meiser to whoever he chooses. And that takes away from the completeness, from the perfection of the gift. Because there's something about me as well. I get a benefit from it also. So it's not a Nesina Karoi. But by Leket Shikha and Peah, since he can't choose who it goes to, he has to leave it in the field, and whoever Ani that wants it, that's there, can come and take it. Therefore, that's considered a Nesina B'Shleimusa, a perfect gift. Rashi is over mashmit Meiser Ani. Rashi omits Meiser Ani. Hayes says in them hoter tevas ana, hoter neisen the tevas ana, because the Meiser Ani, the giver, has a personal benefit. Can this given to the aniyim as a kleiptis was an craving the he can give it to the poor people of his choice, relatives or friends and so on and so forth, and therefore it's not a nesina karoi. So therefore Rashi is telling us is like this: Kol aneisen leket shicho pe'aloni karoi. If you give it properly, then mylin olav ki'ilu bona beis hamikdash v'hikri p'naseis v'sechav. If it's a perfect gift, then it's as if he built a beis hamikdash. But Rashi does not include Meiser Ani, because Meiser Ani is not considered a perfect gift, because it's not only about the Ani, it's also about the giver as well. And on this topic, he adds a prat. High timer. Is euch mer massen der Vergleich von Kilu Bonner Beis Hamikdash, nicht nur Beis Hamikdash Kayam. Now that we made this distinction, that by Meiser Ani, the giver has a personal benefit, but by Leket Shikha and Peah, it's only about the Ani and not about the giver. Now the comparison to Bonner Beis Hamikdash versus Beis Hamikdash Kayam makes more sense, is more understood. Warum? Der Binyan is durch Hayagia. Was tachlis is the anah von jeden Iden und von alle Iden von Klal Yisrael. Building a Beis Hamikdash is an effort, it is a toil that benefits every Yid, the whole Klal Yisrael. It's not just a benefit for himself. When a person brings karbonis, the benefit of the carbon is for himself. He brought the carbon. It doesn't necessarily benefit everyone else. But Beis Hamikdash, building a Beis Hamikdash benefits everyone. So therefore, since we're not talking about Meiser Ani, if we were including Meiser Ani like the Rabbi Abedimus and Teres Kohanim, then Meiser Ani it benefits the Ani. It also benefits the giver. So it's more like he's bringing his own carbon. So he says basically there's Kayam. But Rashi is talking specifically about the mitzvahs that have no benefit to the giver and only to the recipient, and therefore it's like he built the Beis Hamikdash, which is a benefit that goes to all of Klal Yisrael, not just to the builder himself. And thus we have answered why Rashi includes Shikha. We have answered why Rashi uses the word moitze, why Rashi uses the word noisin lani karoi, even though the Teres Kohanim says the word moitzi, because the Teres Kohanim is focusing on the fact that the person is spending it, and the Rashi is focusing on the fact that it's being given to the ani. We also understand why Rashi does not say meiser ani, because Rashi cannot include a mitzvah in which there is tevas hana, because Rashi is focusing on the nesina, and the nesina can only be karoi and bishleimus, complete and proper, if there's no tevas hana to the giver, if there's no personal benefit to the giver. Start over the Shaila and Sif Test. We're going to explain the word v'chag. Why does Rashi add? One of our questions was, why does Rashi add the word v'chag if it's not mentioned in Teres Kohanim? And it's going to say that there's a question that remains that is answered through the words v'chag. Word v'chag. So the question becomes, all of these details, the fact that a person is doing the yigiyah, and it's a yigiyah that's negiyah techai nafshe, and he's giving it to the oni, and giving it to the oni is karoi because he has no toivas hanoah. All of these details are applicable also to peret karmecha and oilulis, to the grapes, the young grapes or the individual grapes. When the first time the Torah commands us about leket and peah, it also mentions oilulis and peret karmecha. So the question is, why doesn't he include that in the statement? Why doesn't he say? Now the reason why the Torah doesn't say it is because there's no two lavin. The Torah shows that you're only over on two lavin by leket and peah. And we said that according to Pshutas Mikra, it's not a question why these and not others. That's what the Eibishter wants. So why the Torah doesn't mention peret and oilulis is understood. But why doesn't Rabbi Avardimus mention it in his statement? To say that a person gives leket, shikha, peah, peret, and oilulis, it's kilu basically the skayim. Why does he not add oilulis and peret karmecha? They stay in it in pasuk da, and even though you're going to say maybe he doesn't include it because the pasuk doesn't include it, he said dachmeis v'shikha. Hagam zivet nit dermot in pasuk. You can't answer that because Rabbi Avardimus does include shikha, even though the pasuk doesn't mention it. So he's not remaining consistent to only the things that are in the pasuk. So once he's going to a broader array of mitzvahs, why doesn't he not include oilulis and peret karmecha? The Rebbe brings Rashi in the Kasha. The gears of Rabbi Avardimus v'chag mikan. This way Rashi includes the word v'chag, and he brings the gears that has the word v'chag to mat gezayin to emphasize as the retzich wegen der Zeit von kedem achag. We're still talking about a time that's before Sukkot. Before the time of gathering the produce of the field, which happens on Sukkot or around Sukkot. When the fire is the masim to the man in our shikha, and therefore it is appropriate to mention shikha. But see, which is possible to happen during the time of the harvest around Shavuos, but not the mitzvahs that are connected with grapes. But which is their time of collecting, of harvesting, of bringing them into the house. How only happens much later on Sukkot. So it's a very beautiful and simple explanation. When the pasuk is discussing these mitzvahs, no one is collecting grapes. It's too early in the season. So therefore, it doesn't make sense for Rabbi Avardimus to tell us now if you give peret and oilulis there's no peret and oilulis to give. No one is busy harvesting the I don't know if the word harvest is correct. They're collecting the grapes, picking the grapes from the vineyard. It's not the time of the year yet. So by Rashi saying v'chag, Rashi is emphasizing we're not yet at Chag HaOsif. We didn't yet get to the time of the gathering. And therefore, we're not discussing peret and oilulis. We're only discussing things that could happen now, which is leket, shikha, and peah. Und das ist euch meisiv bir, and then was Rashi bringt die Gierse welche is mashmin meiser ani. This also adds an explanation, in addition to the fact that we said we don't mention meiser ani, because meiser ani has teivas hana, and teivas hana would not be a nisina b'shlei musa, complete, a perfect giving. Here's another reason why Rashi doesn't say meiser ani. Warum echt die nisinas meiser ani von tvuas aretz is al derech haragel zusammen mit nisinas ha-meiseris von yikvecha in zmana asif, because when a person gives the meiser from the produce, from the crops of the field, it's usually the same time that he's giving meiser from yikvecha, from his vineyard, from his wine. Which, when would that happen? Is mana asif. Additionally, meiser sheni comes not when stuff is still in the field, but after the stuff was already brought in to the house, or to wherever it gets brought into, which is in the time of the asif, which is during Sukkot. So therefore, it's not yet Ma'aser Ani time either. So besides the fact that Ma'aser Ani doesn't fit it over here because of the Teivas Hana, also because of the time of the year, we're somewhere between Shavuos and Sukkot, which is before the Zman HaAsif, and therefore, it's not yet a time of bringing in grapes, and nor is it yet a time of giving Ma'aser. And therefore, Rashi says, and that explains why Rashi adds in the word v'chag to highlight, to remind us which part of the year we're talking about, that we have not yet reached the season of Chag HaAsif. V'yesh leimar. And now the next two paragraphs is going to add two more details with regards to Meiser Oni versus Leket Shikcha and Peah, which we just explained. The second reason is because it hasn't given Meiser Oni yet. And then using this guiding, this approach, also explaining the difference between Kerem and Leket Shikcha and Peah. Let's do one thing at a time. V'yesh leimar, as eich mitzad dem, is Meiser Ani nit legamri b'doima to Leket Shikcha and Peah, in dem was kol hanesim v'chulu mailin olav kilu bana beis mikdash v'ikar olav korban esav. There's another detail that differentiates between Meiser Ani and versus Leket Shikcha and Peah with regards to this comparison to korbanos. Vibaldas the nesina for Meiser Ani is nit jeden yor vi leket v'chulu nor ein mal in drei yor. Since the giving of Meiser Ani happens once in 3 years, not every single year, the Rebbe drikt sich in dem nit ois if as they feel as git der mit avek sein chayis nafshay wie bei the andere demont mitzvahs. It doesn't focus so much on the fact that he's giving away chayis nafshay. In other words, the whole comparison is because a person is giving away chayis nafshay, which he got through yegiyah. Therefore, it's considered to be Beis Hamikdash and Akravas HaKarbanis. But if it's not considered Chaye Navshay, then it's not really exactly like Karbanis. Just like we said before about if the Nisin is not Kuroya, then it's not like Karbanis. He's saying that if it's not Chaye Navshay, it's not like Karbanis. So being that by Meiser Ani it only happens once in 3 years, it doesn't feel like something that is a necessity, something that is literally taking food out of his mouth and giving it away to the Ani, and therefore it's not mamish compared to Bana Beis Hamikdash. We can use the similar idea with regards to Kerem. Versus nit amaz and hechech from the mention. Number one, Kerem has two details. Number one, wine is not a necessity. Food, bread, wheat is a necessity. Wine is not a necessity. So again, when a person gives away peret v'eilolois, he's not giving away chayi nafshay. Zeis v'eid. Another detail was the tirche, the netiya bekerem is nit meshach zman rav jeden yar v'batfuas asada. In order to plant a vineyard, it doesn't take, after you set it up, after you built it or put it or made it, planted it the first time, every year it has to be nurtured or taken care of, but it doesn't have as much effort as charisha, uzriya, like a field does. So by Kerem, number one, the yegiya is not so strong. Number two, the necessity is not so strong, and therefore the dimyan to Bana Beis Hamikdash is not so strong. And it's another reason why Rabbi Avardimas and Rashi don't mention Peret and Eilis. Besides the fact that it's the wrong season of the year, also it's not mamish kilu Bana Beis Hamikdash because of these two details. It's not a necessity and it's not such hard work. So we've pretty much answered all of our questions. In other words, in the last seif we answered why Rashi mentions the Chag, why it doesn't say Peret v'Eilis. The only two questions that we didn't answer yet is number one, why Rashi brings the name Rabbi Avardimas. And we had a question on the last part of Rashi, Ta'azoiv. Why does Rashi not explain the word Ta'azoiv the first time around in Parshas Kedoshim? So, and that's what we're going to address in Sif Yud, the Rashi Ta'azoiv. Behemshech lazen is Rashi mefarish Ta'azoiv hanach lahem ve'im yilkatu ve'ein lecha l'tziyah lecha mihem. Leave it alone, leave it there, let them collect it, and don't help them collect. So we had a question, why does Rashi not say this the first time? So he explains, in the first time, in the first mitzvah where it says, Rashi has no need to explain anything. Over there we understand the pasuk on a more simple, basic level. The Torah is telling us, what does the mitzvah of Peyah and Lekar consist of? Do not cut down the corner. Don't collect the individual stalks. What should I do with it? Leave it for the ani and the ger. Over there, the word tazev means literally leave it there and don't collect it. But now that we are in our parsha, where a person already knows what I'm supposed to do from the previous parsha, as the pay and leket, that the pay and the leket has to be left for the poor. And the fact, the whole second mention of it here is is in order to tell me this comparison that if a person gives these matanis to the aniyim, it's as if he built the Beis Hamikdash and brought karbanis, and to emphasize the fact that the gift has to be properly and completely. That it's so to the point that the owner of the field should not even have any side benefit from this. Is move on, we can understand as Eich the Esaf Alani will get Tazav Esaf. Yes, as Eich the basement shameful parashas Gedeshim. So now you can understand that the word Tazav is Behemshech Laza. He's continuing on this theme that because I already know what Tazav means basically on a basic level from the previous parsha. So if the Torah says it again, Lani will get Tazav Esaf, then it's part of the overall limud of the comparison of Leket Shikha and Peah to Karbanis, and then the Nesina has to be properly. So the La'ani V'Lager Tazav Eisam the second time is adding another detail in the perfection, in perfecting the giving. And how do you perfect the giving? By minimizing the enjoyment or the benefit of the giver. The Rebbe is asking Mefarish, leave it and don't help them collect it. Not only does the person not have the tevas hana to choose to whom to give, he's not even allowed to help the person giving. A person might say, okay, I can't choose who I want to give it to, but I want to be there. I want to be the one to give it. I enjoy giving. So the Torah says no. In order to give it to the ani properly, you can't enjoy any part of it. And therefore, hanachlem, v'heim yilkutu, they should collect it by themselves, and you shouldn't help them, because part of the nesina karoi is you not enjoying any aspect of it, even the aspect of helping them. So therefore, Rashi teaches tazav here in this way, because the first time tazav means literally, leave it there. Let the ani the ger come and get it. The second time, it has to be part of the limud that we're learning here. So therefore, Rashi teaches it in a way that it fits in with the previous Rashi, with the previous limud, that he's giving it in a way that he has no enjoyment, even the enjoyment of giving. The last thing that remains in the questions that we asked is the Shem Imre. Why does Rashi mention the name Rabbi Avardimas? This is going to be to answer the question of a Talmud Mulach. A Talmud Mulach can have enough fragen. The seasoned student can ask after Pirish for Rabbi Avardimas. As Kol Anesan like a Shikhopeya Koroi Mailan and Love Kilu and Bana Beis Hamikdash. That if a person gives like a Shikhopeya, it's as if he built the Beis Hamikdash. In Vos steht for die Grace Meile von dem was nimmt zu und geht weg a Sach und nicht haben die eigene Tevas an. How great is this idea that he's giving something away without tevas hana? And he explains in the brackets. And he's going to explain that what he's giving is minimal. We're focusing on how he's giving it. Normally, the gift of leket shikha and peah is not a large quantity. One or two fallen stalks of leket. The part of our guests in the zayin, a few forgotten stalks, or the stalks in the corner of the field. In the Torah itself, there's no amount for payah. There's no amount. Even if he leaves one stalk in the corner of the field, he fulfills his obligation. Even if the Rabbanan did designate an amount, a 1/60th of the field, it's still a very small amount. So what the person is giving is minimal. Is emes take vibaldos kum megia kapav is im tire echt davar mot. True that because it came through the effort of his hands, it's still even a small amount still is important to him, still is precious to him. Late Pirush Rashi is of the ikar der efen anisina. Late neisen leket shikho peil ani karoi. But according to Rashi is not focusing on how much you're giving. Usually it's a very small amount. Rashi is focusing on how you're giving, that it should be karoi. So he's saying that because I don't have Teves Hana, it's such an amazing, incredible feat that it's as if I built a Beis Hamikdash. So the Talmud Mulach says, 1 second. I understand it's a good thing, it's a wonderful thing, but is it that great? Is it so great that you can compare it to building a Beis Hamikdash because I don't have a Teves Hana? Then bringt Rashi Shem Balamaymer. This is why Rashi brings the name of the Balamaymer. Rabbi Averdimos. Chazal der Zell in Yerushalmi. The Chazal tells us in Yerushalmi, Masechta Shvis, as Yehuda Ish Hutzi hat sich behalten 3 Tag. Yehuda Ish Hutzi hid for 3 days in a cave after Gayin to uncover. Minayin, how do I know? Shechaye ir hazois koid bin lechaye ir acheres. How do I know? The Gemara over there is saying like this: if there's a well in one city that also it extends into another city, but if there's only enough water to provide for the city that has the well, then the life of that city comes first. This is a teaching of Rabbi Bar Chalafta. So Yehuda Ish Hutzi wanted to know, how do you know this? So the Gemara says over there, the Talmud Yerushalmi says over there, that after 3 days he came to Rabbi Bar Chalafta. He said, where were you? He says, I was hiding in a cave for 3 days because I was trying to figure out, how do you know that the life of this city comes before the lives of the people of the other city? So Rabbi Yesi had gerufen sein Sohn Rabbi Averdimus. So Rabbi Yesi called his son. As Erzlun Zogin, Hadein Taima, Minayin Shechaye Ir Azois, Kein Lechaye Ir Acheres. Tell him the reason. How do you know that the lives of this city, of the people of this city, come before the lives of the people of the city? Omar Lei, so he said to him, Tiyena Ha'orim Ha'ela, Tiyena Ir V'ir, Ve'achar Kach U'migrisheha Sviveseha. He says, use the word Tiyena, read it as if it said Tichyena. Tichyena, they should live. So first the city should live, and then U'migrisheha Sviveseha, then the outskirts of the city should live. So that was the makir of this pasuk. By the way, in the Gemara over there, Rabbi Yesi says to this Yehuda Ish Hutzi, do you know why you couldn't figure it out on your own? Because you were learning by yourself and you weren't learning with your friends. When you learn with Chaverim, the learning goes better. And you would have been able to discover it by yourself. Because you hid in a cave for 3 days, you were all by yourself. It was therefore you couldn't get to the answer. Just like a shmaka and a kuda. Okay. The lechera, Rabbi Yesi gedarf rufen sein Sohn Averdimus und ihm sagen, Ezel empfehlen. Why did Rabbi Yesi call in Rabbi Averdimus to give the answer? Why couldn't he say it himself? If Rabbi Yesi is there was a gesagt with him. The din was said by Rabbi Yesi Bar Chalafta. So surely he knew the makir. So why, when the person comes in to ask the question, does he call in his son Rabbi Averdimus and tell him, give him the answer? The phone is verstandig. From the fact that Rabbi Yesi calls in his son, we understand as that Inyan is given Rabbi Averdimus limud miyuchad. That this was Rabbi Averdimus' special study. That we say about Rabbi Yehuda that all of his learning was in the Zikin, which means that his geschmack, his main learning was in the Zikin. Reb Shimon says to Rabbi Akiva, why are you discussing Agadah with me? Go to Negoim and always. That's your favorite part of learning. And there's other place where we see that certain Tanoim Amiroim had certain parts of Torah that was their favorite part. And similarly, Rabbi Averdimus had a special koch, a special passion in this halacha of Chayir as his kedman, and therefore Rabbi Yesi gerufen. And therefore Rabbi Yesi called him. Das heißt, Tnuye von Rabbi Averdimus, the main study of Rabbi Averdimus is in Deminye. As Alpiteda is the Aniyim as an entered to him. Alpiteda, those poor people that are closer to him, even just the fact that you live in the same city, have a preference towards those poor who live further away from him. This is Rabbi Averdimus' study. This is what he learned, and this is what he had a geschmack in. And him, it says that whoever's closer to you has a din knima, gets priority. Is the fish it moving the great sechid? So now, according to Rabbi Averdimus, we understand the incredible change that we're doing over here. As Nason leket shikha peilani karoi, mylin love kilo bonabis minus vehikriv. That if a person gives leket shikha and peya, it's as if he built the base of mikdash. But this conduct that is expected from the person as omnit maktim zayin divs and krev me love, or to not give first to those who are closer to him, or those that are related to him, or even those who live in the same city as him, far andere before others, is against the nature that Torah teaches us a person should have. Torah teaches us that a person should give Taniyah Yircha Kaidman and to his kravim even before that. And this is Rabbi Averdimus' passion. This is what he had a geschmack in. So Rabbi Averdimus says that if a person breaks that and gives to the ani, not his favorite ani, and not his close ani, and not the ani of his city, he gives it b'shleimus mamish, that is an incredible feat. And therefore, it's kilo bana beis hamikdash, and with this, we have answered all of the questions that we had in the beginning of the sikha. Sif Yud Beis is going to point out in Yanim Mufloim al Derech HaHalacha that the way Rashi explains this pasuk, especially together with the words la'ani v'lager tazev eisam, actually brings out a machloikis in halacha between Rashi and Rambam. We find something incredible in halacha. The Rambam paskin das peyo and azayich leket v'shikcha zalav anitik la'aseh. That peya and leket and shikha is considered a lav that is interconnected with the mitzvah saseh. As if a person cut down the entire field, including the peya, he didn't leave, he did not leave any part of the corner of the field connected, uncut, unharvested. He's like, he takes a little bit of what he cut, and he has to give it to the poor, because giving to the poor is a mitzvah saseh. So he says like this, there's a mitzvah saseh, there is a mitzvah saseh of so if a person did not do he cut it all down, he still has to do the asay of That's the Rambam's opinion. But according to Rashi, that we said is not a mitzvah to give it to the ani, but it's an instruction to let them take it by themselves. This would bring out that this is not a lav that's connected to an asay. Their pasuk la'ani v'geimer l'tazev eisam is nit kinayah chiyav mitzvah. It's not a new mitzvah, a mitzvah asay. Welch is menatik dem lav durch neusnei, which connects, or menatik could mean which undoes the lav through giving it geben das la'ani. The la'ani v'lager tazev eisam, as stated in Parshat Kedoshim, is mitayer dem eifen kiyum alav. La'ani v'lager tazev eisam, the first one, is describing how you fulfill the lav. You shouldn't cut down the corner of the field by leaving it to the ani. The second tazev is also describing the mitzvah, that there shouldn't be any hana in it, including the hana of giving it. So Rashi has a different explanation. It's not a mitzvah saseh to give. It's a description of how to do leisachala pasotcha. The first time, it's the basic description to leave it for the ani, and the second time to not have a noah from it by giving it. Let's say the same thing, but in other words. The fact that you're leaving it for the ani of the ger and you're not giving it to them, they're taking it themselves, and he has no enjoyment from giving it. It's not a supplemental detail that if you didn't do leisachala pasatcha, then you should do nor does it gedera mitzvah. It's the definition of the mitzvah. The gedera mitzvah is not only that you have to take it from your field, also by giving it to the ani properly. It's part of the mitzvah. How you describe the mitzvah, that is the entire mitzvah. So the Rambam holds that it's two separate mitzvahs, a mitzvah leisas and a mitzvah say, and therefore it's a lava nitik laseh. But according to Rashi, it's not a separate mitzvah. It is part of the very same mitzvah. How do I do this mitzvah? By giving it to the leaving it for the ger, and not being involved in the giving it, so that way there's no enough for the giver. In Sif Yud Gimel, we're going to end the Sikha with a Hira. David Hashem and Yenishal Torah. For them, and for Pirish Rashi, we take a Hira lesson, a very powerful, beautiful, short, and sweet lesson. Avifalis is Nagia as a key mitzvah. Mitzvah Kala, how important it is that when we do a mitzvah, even a minor mitzvah, Shibelis Achas Peter is a mitzvah that you could fulfill with one stalk of wheat. So Knal Sif Yudalev, so Gitan Verim and Emes, it should be done truthfully, in a genuine way, on Kinpnius on Ano, without any motives and without any personal benefit. So number one, when you do the mitzvah, in the positive, when you do the mitzvah, it should be done genuinely without any ulterior or personal motives. How important it is, the iskafia, the person breaking themselves, coercing themselves to do something that's against their nature. Kaifes Yitzrei, the fact that he forces the Yitzhara. Bizvi ba kisida chamer sinach arei v'tachas masoi, oziv taziv imei, is mitzvah v'seina kei lokafas Yitzrei. The Gemara says that from the fact that it says kisida chamer sinacha, if you have two donkeys that are both struggling, one is your friend's donkey and one is your enemy's donkey, it's a greater mitzvah to help your enemy's donkey because you're breaking your Yitzhara. You're going against Yitzhara because your Yitzhara wants to help your friend, not your enemy. So even though the mitzvah is by everyone, the Torah says Seinacha to tell you that it's a bigger mitzvah to help your Seina. Why? Because that goes against your Yitzhara. If I say feel, as Davke Mitzadema says, Mekayim the mitzvah from Leket, Hepech v'yastruktus mitzatev al pitera. And because of that, when he does this mitzvah against the way Torah teaches you the nature should be, as we talk at Stam Gita, Aniyah Makrev, free regular sucker you give to your own, to close poor people first. Mitzad dem Davke, because he's going against his nature, Mylin love, a nature that Torah says should be his nature. Mylin love Akasuf, Mylin love Kilu Bana Beis Hamikdash, that makes it considered as if he built a Beis Hamikdash and brought karbanis. And the bracha at the end, when a person is involved in changing his midas of his nature and changing the nature, the natureness of his midas, which is a whole different discussion in these two. What's the difference in these two expressions? But either way, the idea is to break the nature. It becomes, instead of it's considered as if he built the Beis Hamikdash, it becomes in reality that Binya Beis Hamikdash, the actual building. When a person does a mitzvah, and he does it not just to do the mitzvah right, but he does it in a way that breaks his nature, then this brings the actual building of Beis Hamikdash. We'll be able to do everything as the Eibush commanded us in the Beis Hamikdash Shlishi, Sheyibana b'meheira v'yameinu mamash.